Good evening, and welcome to tonight's Flagler County Planning and Development Board meeting. Today's date is May 10, 2022. Roll call, please.
Michael Boyd advised us he would be out of town. Timothy Connor. Here. Jack Corbett advised us he was unable to make it this evening. Heather Haywood.
Here.
Mark Langella also advised us he was not able to make it. Anthony Lombardo.
Here.
And Fernando Melendez.
Here.
And 4 members does make a quorum.
Thank you. Would everybody rise, please, and join us for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, I'd like to the approvals of the agenda for April 12, 2022. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of the agenda, last meeting's agenda. As you know, this is a quasi-judicial process. The audience should refrain from clapping, booing, or shouts of approval or disagreement to avoid potential legal ramifications and possibly overturning of a decision by the courts. A public hearing must be fair in 3 respects: form, substance, and appearance. Time limits will be observed. Staff gets 10 minutes presentation, applicants 15 minutes presentations unless time extended by consensus of board. Public comments 3 minutes per speaker, 5 minutes if speaking on behalf of a group. Applicant rebuttal and closing staff comments 10 minutes each. Today's first application up is number 3305. Also a quasi-judicial requiring disclosure of ex parte communication. Does anybody have any disclosures here?
I have a question. So just for clarification, because I only heard the April 12th meeting minutes mentioned, did your motion include the 26th as well?
Don't recall if I did, but I will. No.
We've got 2 sets of minutes
I
in
see
the
'em now.
packet.
Yep.
Oh, we have 2 sets.
So my motion does include the approval of the April 12th and the April 26th
Thank you.
meeting minutes.
In the second? Thank you.
Okay, so we have approval. So today's application is 3305, special exception in the C2 General Commercial and Shopping Center. Adam?
We've had a few requests related to this parcel. This is the former Crosby Grocery, for those who have been around the area for a while, and had a couple of different iterations over the years. I think last it was restaurant of sorts, before then maybe a retail boutique thrift store. This property is located at 3468 North Ocean Shore Boulevard. It's on the west side of North Ocean Shore between the portion of the old Intercoastal and A1A. This particular request has even been heard by the planning board before for a roadside vendor for a food truck. We had a review by the planning board. I think, as I'm remembering, I think it was actually approved with conditions, but that use, no, not ultimately approved. We went through some discussions with the owners to the south, is where the location was previously, and they had come out and discussed it at the time. And I think ultimately that food truck ended up setting up in Beverly Beach and had been there for some amount of time. But this operation now, Good Times Dog Bar, has opened up, and they'd like to have the availability of food while the dog bar is in operation. And so a good kind of symbiotic relationship. The hours of operation that you see are from Wednesday to Friday, 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, 11 to 9. And those days and hours, again, link up to the on-site bar's operation. And mainly for the purpose, when you think about it, of all of the ancillary services that are permitted within the Good Times Dog Bar, the restroom availability, the availability of on-site refuse collection, all that linked up with the operation already at the bar, so that the mobile food truck then just comes and sets up on the parcel on a daily basis. Subject parcel you can see here in the aerial. This is before the improvements were done for the dog bar, and let me see if I can get my cursor to work. Good, it's working. And so this is that area where you'll see, if those of you have been watching this, and you'll see a lot of improvements in this area for that outdoor seating. And then on the next slide, the proposed location, it's a pad that's there just outside of that seating area that's available for one or maybe two, maybe three food trucks to set up. Don't want to go too many, but as an enhancement for the patrons of the dog bar is the intent. See on the future land use map, the area designated for mixed use, low intensity, and then the zoning being a split zoning on the parcel, a C2 commercial shopping center designation along with residential limited commercial, and the building mainly sitting under that C2 zoning. To the south, we have an urban single-family residential designation. To the north, more of the same residential limited commercial. On the opposite side of the portion of the old canal, that's going to be part of Island Estates. And across the street is just some of those coastal homes that are on the Atlantic Ocean beachside. This is the site plan that was presented with the application in your packet. That area, again, in red being the proposed site for the food truck setup to occur. And that outdoor seating area, the one-story building, the concrete parking outside there in between the operation and A1A. And we've put in some conditions based on the description of the operation. We had talked with the applicant about these at the technical review committee meeting. I believe they're in agreement with all of our conditions, but certainly we'll look to the applicant when they come up after I go through these conditions to talk about any discrepancies or anything that we need to at least talk about for clarification. So options for your approval with conditions, and that would be that the findings, the guidelines have been met, and that our conditions that we're recommending, those first for roadside vendors, you have a limited operation and approved site not within 500 feet of an existing permanent business offering the same services or products. Number two, you must provide safe ingress, egress to the site, and must obtain a county business tax receipt. And then these are the specific ones that we're recommending for this use. So number four, special exception runs with the land. Number five, location on the site of the food trailer should be in a manner consistent with the site plan submitted as part of this application. No instance be permitted to be placed within a vehicular access way or in a required off-street parking space. Dumpsters should be enclosed and bordered by landscaping or shrubs so as to buffer its location. That's a scenic A1A requirement that we see come up. Number seven, refuse will be collected and disposed of with ordinary waste generated by the applicant's present commercial use, unless additional special requirements are called for by other relevant agencies. Any signs or lighting located on the trailer itself should be configured in a manner so as to maintain traffic safety, minimize glare on adjacent properties. Signage for the use should be limited to the signage affixed to the food truck. And use of electronic messaging signage or signage with exposed illumination shall be prohibited while operating at the property. We do want to have the ability for them to have one two-sided sandwich menu board sign, which may be placed on the parcel adjacent to the A1A right-of-way while the food truck is on-site and open for operations. Days and hours limited, as we stated, Wednesday through Friday, 1 to 9, Saturday and Sunday, 11 to 9. Food truck should not be located on the property outside the days of operation listed above and should be taken off the property daily. The use of amplified speakers on or situated in association with the food truck shall be prohibited while operating at the property. Mobile food vendor must obtain a mobile food unit license from the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, Division of Hotels and Restaurants. Mobile food unit shall not have permanent connections to on-site utilities, and then provide evidence of permit or approval from Florida Department of Transportation for the additional use on the property. You do have also as part of your packet a letter of review from Scenic A1A that should mirror fairly closely with these conditions, also some of the details that they showed on their site plan. Do also provide you with the option for denial. And with the denial option, you should then state what guidelines were not met in your denial so as to create a record that can then proceed through an appeal if one is sought. And then you can also continue this if you feel that information has not been provided by staff or by the applicant. And we would ask then that continuance would be to a time and date certain, our next meeting in June. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close, await any questions or comments. The applicant is present, and should you have any questions for them, they may have a presentation also. Again, if they want clarification on any conditions, I'm available for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So would the applicant like to come up and present, please?
Evening.
What's your name, sir?
Chris Huddleston, my wife,
Rebecca.
Rebecca Blackowitz.
Where are you guys from? Address?
Originally, or?
No, your address, your
No, we live in Orm by the Sea. We stay at a friend's.
state there, is that fine? Okay.
So regarding the Florida code for the roadside vendor with the FDOT, we talked to Chad Langenfelter from Traffic Operations in Land District 5. He said regarding code 1496, the roadside vendor will not increase the trips by 25%, excuse me, 25% from what is presently doing. There is no need for FDOT approval. That was from him. So we did reach out to him on Thursday.
The buffering on the south side?
Yeah, there was a request for some sort of buffering on the south side to our southern neighbors. There is a 4 foot to 5 foot retaining wall that's already has several cracks in it. It's not exactly, I don't think it's secure, so I'm not sure how I feel about digging next to it and planting shrubbery. I don't want to be blamed for if it starts cracking it more, or if we can get that HOA to kind of agree with us to what they would want. The neighbors were actually supposed to be here in the HOA, but they had something come up and they weren't able to make it, which is the secretary of the HOA and then the third house over. They weren't able to make it tonight.
You have any questions for the applicant?
I have a couple. The dog bark, what is the dog bark? Because I drive by it all the time.
So it's a private dog park that serves beer and wine. The outline fence there, that's all astroturf fenced in for off-leash area, and then everything else around it is all on-leash. So we also have additional seating in the back. We have fire pits and swings built, and then on the back deck, there's also like a 4-table, high-top tables that seat about 16 people. So,
And their pets, obviously.
I'm sorry.
And their pets, so it's like a beer garden to
Yeah,
bring your
you get
bring
to
your
have a
dog
couple
with
beers
you.
and hang out with your dog in the evening, let them run around. It's a little safer than a dog park. We require vaccination records. The dog has to be social, and any mean dogs get removed. And we always have a staff member in the park with everybody to keep the dogs calm and keep the fights from breaking out.
Gotcha. Going to the food truck for the application, are you guys planning to have multiple food trucks on site at a time, or is it just going to be,
The majority of the park would be one food truck. Maybe if we had a big special event, we've been talking to the Flagler Humane Society about doing a yappy hour for them next month. The Flagler County Sheriff's Department is talking about doing maybe a volunteer and do some sort of training with their canine units over there. So it would just depend on what kind of flow of traffic we would need in order to keep up with the amount of people we would have over there. So chances are it would be one truck for the 90% of the time.
Okay.
Maybe a special
I guess
event.
this question is for staff. I mean, there's plenty of parking there, obviously, it's a big parking lot, but I mean, should we have in the conditions any limitation to, the amount of food trucks that they have on site at one time? So then, maybe one weekend, if they have to decide to have a food truck party and have, 5, 6, 7 food trucks that could get out of hand. I mean, should we have any limitations to the amount of food trucks on property?
We kind of thought about that, and I think we may have talked about it, and then we were also thinking that food trucks, they don't, honestly, they don't want to make food trucks mad, because more of them end up diluting the business they're going to have. I get the idea of having variety, but I think they're talking about more of a permanent relationship with one or two that could rotate in and out. And if you want to place a limitation, you can. We had always talked about 2 or 3. I think anytime when we mentioned that with the applicant, they said 1. I think their idea was to have 1 or 2 that would be there and maybe even rotating through. But certainly that's something maybe they can talk more about. Our whole concern was not in a parking area. And I don't really want to have this, and I don't think our intent, the applicant's intent isn't to have it that way either, where, hey, look, there's a food truck, I'm driving down the road, and I'm going to pull over and get a taco at the taco food truck. If that happens, and then great, there's no prohibition on it, but it's principally for the dog bar patrons, and that's how it's being approached, and I think if you want to express a number that you can have as a restriction, you can certainly add that as a condition, not to exceed 3 at a time, or however you'd want to do it. I think that would be fine.
Okay. That's all I have.
Do you have any questions for the applicant? Have any questions?
I have no question.
Do you have any questions?
The shrubbery, the buffer that you're talking about. And so in here, it says that you're going to provide a buffer, and now you're saying that now you're not sure if you feel comfortable doing it.
There's been several buffers mentioned. So there's been a buffer on the south wall mentioned, which wouldn't see the food truck anyway. But in front of the food truck, as far as that goes, we're definitely willing to put some shrubbery in front of it
Yep.
to kind of shroud it a little bit from the neighbors. And also the dumpster will be shrubbed or pushed back farther behind the privacy fence that's there
So
now.
do you need to work with the HOA on the buffer that you're not comfortable with prior to, I guess?
Correct.
Because
I
if
would
you're
like
not
to get
comfortable
their
with it, I don't.
permission and their engineers or whatever their site management is, because they're getting ready to build a new house right there also. And I want to make sure it's okay with them, but I don't want to disturb that land and then they see a crack in it and then the neighbor can't build their house and then try to blame it on us.
Oh, yeah.
Which is very, very possible. It doesn't look very, I don't know if it's stable, it's just settled and just has some cracks in it, but
So I guess my questions is for Adam. Do we see where we can vote on this tonight, or maybe have the neighbors come back when they're back here? He says that they were supposed to be here tonight and they changed their.
So, a couple of things that, and I think the answer about the location of the food truck's a good one. What we're trying to do here is trying to, in some ways, strike a bit of a balance with A1A corridors requirements, because A1A is saying you're going to have typically a 40-foot, as much as a 40-foot landscape buffer adjacent to A1A. This being a developed site that developed before the A1A criteria came into being, it didn't have that. It actually has the parking basically slap up to the right-of-way. And so we had talked before with other uses when those had come in, and the previous food truck applicant, and I'll try to show you here, their location was in this corner where basically the dumpster's shown now. And so when we had the discussion before with the property owner to the south, it was more imperative that the buffer be provided. This is the adjacent uncomplimentary buffer that's here for the use of the property itself. The special exception applying to the entirety of the property, and not necessarily to maybe diminish the idea that says, okay, our food truck's in the center, but everything else they have as far as their operation is a permitted use on the commercial property. We're trying to shoehorn a bit of, if they can find a happy medium, do some plantings. They've talked about doing that. I'm probably just as much uncomfortable saying you've got to do something as I am in saying you don't have to do anything, because the special exceptions for the roadside vendor for that operation. And I agree with the applicant that, you're not going to see that as much as you're going to see the building that's there. I'd like the landscaping or something around the dumpster, because that cuts down the noise and cuts down on the aesthetics there, and we require that elsewhere within the scenic A1A corridor. And then in addition to that, just kind of try whatever you can. It's not necessarily a hard and fast requirement for, we talked about maybe banana trees, I think is what they're interested in planting. I talked about bamboo, that something was a fast growing, that, sometimes a nuisance, but it would provide a good kind of level of some buffering there to the south, just to alleviate concerns that may exist in the future. And, I'm not talking about planting on the wall, but I think you can still set back some, from that, and still have it where you can, then have some wall maintenance that would happen. You don't have to be right on it, but I'd be hesitant to tell you you have to. I'd be hesitant to say you don't. I think as much as they can provide is probably a good happy medium coming out of today's proceedings.
and I believe that the person that purchased that property, they just purchased it like 2 months ago. And they, excuse me, And they came by and they said they were gonna do some sort of a wall. They just had to figure out what was allowed by the county. They want to do a privacy fence in the meantime as they build, which they're gonna start building, I think, this fall. But they've already been over and said it was okay. We got the whole south side of the property cleaned up compared to what it used to be.
I think with all of the setbacks regarding to another structure and the egress of vehicles in and out kind of limits them on the amount of food trucks already. And because you're not allowed to take away any parking, so I doubt you can get more than 3 in there and
We
still
have
be in
no plans on
compliance.
putting 3 in. I could see maybe 2, maybe for the big garage sale next spring. Or you guys have like a 140-mile garage sale or something in those means. Maybe do something for that, but I don't really see us. Even the capacity of our property and our bar, if there's more than 100 people there, it's gonna be over. We wouldn't be comfortable with that many people and that many dogs in there anyway. But, like rival food truck, taken from waiting each other, so.
Any additional questions for Rob?
No, I mean, I'll make a motion to approve the application, but adding staff's conditions 1 through 13. So my motion is to approve application 3305 with staff's conditions of 1 through 13.
Second.
Okay, so we have an,
I have a couple of questions to ask staff. We haven't had any public comment on
Yeah,
this.
we can, Mr. Chairman,
number
we can entertain the motion and then have, I'd say not to vote. We've got a motion and a second on the floor, but if we can now open it for public comment, we can do that.
all right, so thank you.
And I've got a couple of questions for staff. Item number 4, the condition number 4, the special exception run with the land, this business operation is a leasehold. Is there a reason, what staff's thinking on having this run with the land?
It's always based on the physical characteristics of the parcel. And so our criteria, when you go through those guidelines, they're all off-street parking, unloading, lighting, signage. It's stuff that it's tied to the parcel. We've had a very few that have been linked to the operator, and we don't have the food truck operator here. We could kind of shake our finger at them and tell them they've got to do certain things. So with this one, he is under a leasehold with an option to purchase. And so that may change the characteristics a little bit, but that's fairly common for us to say it runs with the land. And he does have the owner's permission to seek the special exception and the conditions.
If you like, you could also put that it would leave with us, the special exception. That way, if we did, worst case scenario, we failed, and A1A Commission was worried about that, if another restaurant came in and the food truck exception was still there, so they could put a restaurant and a food truck, which would counteract your exception. And that's what the A1A was concerned about, so we were trying to write it so you guys were able to revoke it if we were to lose our lease.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but, I mean, since Sid Crosby's grocery store, this has probably been a dozen different things. If it becomes Sid Crosby's grocery store again, I doubt he's gonna want a food truck out front. So I see that as incongruent, but it doesn't give me any heartburn. I'm okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could offer one explanation back. If the CUNA was concerned about restaurant and food truck, number 1 in the list that you see in front of you would prohibit that.
So it would null the exception, correct? If they open the restaurant.
Yeah,
it
you
would null
can't,
the
you can't
exception.
have prepared foods also available. Yes, sir.
Is that all? Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll open it up to public comment. Does anybody have a comment? Step right up. Please state your name.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Mitchell.
Ma'am,
I live at 2719 Ocean Shore Boulevard.
Take a couple of steps to your right, speaking to the microphone. We are broadcasting this. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and I live at 2719 North Ocean Shore Boulevard. And I'm just a typical patron at the Good Times Dog Bar and Park. And some of my comments seem a little weird now, but I'll just go ahead and say what I view and what I see. I feel this is a safer type of dog park. All the dogs have to register their documented vaccinations, and they don't do that at restaurants or public dog parks. The couple that own it, we've watched them over the last year build this place. We've seen an awful lot of money go in. Beautiful landscaping, incredibly custom-made furniture. It's just beautiful. You feel like you're in the Key West on vacation. And we've also watched them push wheelbarrows and shovel. A hardworking, very impressive young couple that we've watched diligently work. We were concerned about them not having the restaurant because they put so much money and effort into this property. It's hard to see how they're going to be profitable without the restaurant. But now the food truck has become an option, which certainly is better than nothing because people are drinking, sitting around for several hours in the sun. They need something to eat to safely get home. And so the food truck is good, but it's not the kind of profit I think that the overhead for the property demands. So there's really going to have to be a lot of, public traffic there, which so far everybody's just delighted when they go. I took an 82-year-old neighbor up there who recently had a knee operation, and I talked him into getting his dog's vaccinations up to date. I took him there, and he got a chance to get outside. He got a chance to socialize. The dog, who's been cooped up for months, got to run, and the dog is healthier, he's happier. And when he dropped me off at my house, he put his hand on my arm and he said, "You did a good thing today." And that really made me feel good. And without that Good Times dog bar, that would have never happened. The signage thing breaks my heart because I see huge signs all up and down A1A, and you really can't tell what's there when you drive by it. Even I sometimes have to make a U-turn because just like that, you're past it. It's the traffic, 45 miles per hour on A1A. It just, you just miss it. So they really need to be seen more. And I think that they're an asset to the community. Everybody who comes there is just so delighted. People who don't even have dogs are there. I'm one of them. And we had a group of 8 golfers, ladies who came there just to hang out. So it's really a nice communal place for people to be outside in a lovely environment, get to know their neighbors. And so many of the restaurants all up and down A1A now have a doggy-friendly area where they're serving food to people with dogs. Whoops. So I guess I'm done. But if you haven't been there, you really need to go because it's really nice.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anybody else to come up with comments? Oh, come right up, sir.
Hi, my name is Steve Taylor. I live on Island Estates. And anything else you need to know?
No, that's
Okay.
your name and where you're from. and
Okay,
Your
good.
comment, please.
Good. I don't so much have comments as I do have some questions. I too have been impressed. I can see from my dock the back of the dog place, and I think the folks here have put a lot of time and effort into it. I'm not sure, given its location, what its prospects are, but that's been good. My questions on this is, where are people going to eat? In the car park? People without a dog? Or are we going to end up with tables and chairs in the car park? And how would that look? The other issue would be, in my mind, in terms of how many customers for the truck versus the dog park, and again, where those people go. I didn't hear whether there was a restriction on that in terms of whether people had to go back into the bar or back into the dog area to eat. The location is right next to where the dogs are, and I know from having dogs, having food and dogs, and a lot of dogs, that could lead to a lot of barking, which from a neighbor standpoint would be an issue. And then in terms of how many customers, what is the bathroom facilities and so forth to support that? And again, thinking about our neighborhood, you know, I got this in the mail about a week or so ago, and it was very hard to see what this was in fact about. But I would suspect there might be a lot of very interested folks across the street and on the other side of the waterway there, if they were clear on what in fact this was entailing. I heard you discuss a continuance. I would strongly support doing that. And certainly if you were going to move forward, as a neighbor and someone that's highly vested in the area, I would say the thought of having multiple food trucks in my backyard, literally, was not why I moved to this area. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any anyone else would like to come up and comment? All right, so I would like the applicant to come up and rebuttal.
Have the seating chart on your overhead?
I don't think you do. No.
Total number of seats and everything? Is there-
No, let me see if I can, hang on. I think I can switch.
Anyway, so we're not really trying to increase the traffic, and that goes along with how many food trucks we want. We don't necessarily want 3 just because of that. We don't want necessarily more traffic or more guests or more people. Right now, we're averaging probably 30 to 90 tickets a day. Saturday and Sunday is our busiest day, which is, you know, pretty average for an average restaurant. Average restaurant, I think, Breakaways probably does over 260, 300 tickets a night. Compared to that, you know, compared to the parking and of that. I know there's been a lot of complaints about the previous owners of this, previous leases of the property having live music and bands after dark and 10, 11 o'clock at night and really making some noise up and down the channel. We don't plan on having any kind of live music, maybe some soft acoustic, maybe back by the fire pits. As far as the dog barking goes, we remove any obsessive dog barking, which is kind of obnoxious because we're at a dog park, but we don't allow dogs to obsessively bark. If they bark 2 or 3 times at each other and just playing, it's okay, but if they're standing there barking and barking and barking, they either get muzzled or removed, and then they're not allowed back on the property. And the same goes with any kind of vicious dog or any aggressive or any kind of unsocialized dogs. We've been working with a lot of neighbors to socialize their dogs a little better, and they might bark a little bit more than the others, but we also have muzzled dogs too because they bark too much. And yeah, so that's the restrooms. Currently, there's 2 women, like universal facilities, and then a men's room with a urinal and a sink. And then there's a total, it says so there's a total of 46 seats outside that we've built, which I think is on the next page. So that's the interior seating. There's 3, there you go. So there's approximately 4 tables on the back deck with 16 seats. And then if you slide down just a little bit, and then the one that would really concern me is because you're to the northwest of us, correct? So that would be the only place that would really, I would worry about being too much noise and excessive. And the same thing, and the same thing that we wouldn't, if there's an obnoxious group out there, if there's too much noise, and I'll give you my cell phone, you can call me and tell me if there's ever too much, you know. But we don't really plan on putting any kind of seating in the parking lot. Like I said, we have a total of 46 seats inside, and I think it was 86 total. Yes, approximately about 75 seats total is what we have now, and we're not planning on putting any more than that. As far as the food goes, you're not allowed to bring any kind of food, treats, toys, or anything in the off-leash area. So you're not allowed to eat where the dogs are off-leash. The only place you're allowed to take food is in the inside, at the bar, and on the back deck, and then in the back by the fire pits. But we don't allow any kind of treats, food, anything like that, just because of aggression and dog barking, so. And we do have our neighbors in mind, so. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions for the applicant? Any other questions? Do not? Thank you. Want to take it to you, Adam? Do you want to say anything?
No, sir, we just hold with the options that we had available for you, and any other questions, we're available for those.
All right, so I believe that we have a
Well,
motion.
so in regards to the concerns of, I mean, I've been in this building once, there's adequate bathrooms and there's adequate space so that's been covered and everything's fine there,
The
correct?
property's on public sewer, and
Right.
so it's on, that's not a concern any more than it is for anybody else who's on public sewer.
Okay. Well, in that case, now it's time. I'm sorry I jumped the gun earlier. Got a little excited there. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve application 3305 with including staff's conditions 1 through 13.
Second that.
So we have a motion to approve, and we have a second to approve this application, number 3305.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. Motion has been approved. Okay. The next is the legislative. Item number 5, transmittal of evaluation appraisal report. Adam?
Yes, sir. You didn't get a chance to see my super special slides last time, so now I got them. There's nothing really here. This returns the comprehensive plan to compliance. It's updated for changes for statutes. Our intent still with this, and so some of this has that feel of trust us, in-depth comprehensive plan update to follow after we get done with our strategic planning effort, which we're underway right now with. And so, again, the idea here is that we're taking this, we're cutting it down to the bones where it should be because of legislative changes, only leaving in that which is required by statute and then building it back up. I think it gives us a good grounding for a good fresh start. Often what you have with this, and I'd say probably when it comes time for the Land Development Code to do the same thing, you have regulation creep. Government often exists to create more government, and so we find that just over the years, we tend to overregulate, and it happens. And this would help us to be able to come back and hopefully find a little bit of focus on some of this. So if you remember back from our special call meeting that we had April 26th, our discussion today is limited to the policy text, the policy language, and I've got the presentation here from the Regional Council that they were unable to do also. I'll probably wander through fairly quickly. Maps coming up in June. So any discussion about those 4 maps and those things that were going to come along with that, the board's direction was for us to talk about that at our June meeting, and we'll stick with that if a notice goes out on that. So right now we're sitting as a recommendation. You've got 2 options: transmittal of the year and the changes to the 2010-2035 comprehensive plan, including the adoption of the amendments to the recently adopted legislation on perils of flood and property rights, or that you continue this to the next meeting, and we recommend that you follow number 1. We are under some time constraint with this, and that you do have an affirmative action and recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners for the transmittal. Quick reminder, you may not know too much about some of this terminology, but the Planning Board, unique in other governments, you are not the local planning agency for Flagler County. It's a term of art reserved in Florida statutes for the authority that has direct and complete land use authority for those statutory changes. I'm brushing through it a little bit too much, but comprehensive plan items, some DRIs, some very limited land use regulatory actions are reserved to what's known as a local planning agency. And here in Flagler County, a little unique, that is reserved to the Board of County Commissioners. And so procedurally, you are a step in the process, but you're not the step in the process. And so our Land Development Code does have some abilities for you to review comp plan amendments, make recommendations on those. That's why we're coming to you with these. This is that presentation for the Regional Council, and so you'd already heard that from Margot Mooring when she was here. And I figured I'd just go through and probably emphasize that the biggest thing we came out of with these was the resiliency language that we came through. And so, our goal with this, and where we started with this process some 3 years ago, is we told the state we were going to come in with our perils of flood amendments. And that was a state requirement that talked about, how you do what you do on a coastal community basis to prepare for those flooding events. And that's what we identified, that we would come forward and do those perils of flood amendments and clear that up. The update summary there, we had some other things that had happened in the meantime that we know are planning timeframe 2035. We're still within that window, so we're still good. Our population estimates, we didn't hit those. Maybe it's because of COVID, but we are still below our Bieber low estimates that we had annually for the progression through to 2035. So we didn't hit those. And so we've got some language that need to be added about approval of affordable housing. Of all things, the state said that it's okay for you to stick that in industrial land use or zoning categories, which I'm not sure if that's maybe such a good idea that you want to shove affordable housing into. It just doesn't sound like a good idea at all to me. But anyway, and then solar facilities permitted in agricultural land use districts. And then we had our water supply plan update that was required. And then that final one that we had talked about before is we had the addition of the property rights element that had come in. Really proud of this, and this is what also that regional council staff had mentioned. We did much of this work with their staff over the years, and so we had this progression from the adaptation action area discussion, some work with Flagler Beach, perils of flood identification, DEP's work with Resilient Coastlines program, and so getting this progression all the way through. And then now, most recently, we've gotten some information from DEP that we've been awarded funding for some vulnerability assessment that is our next step in this process, and we're going to be handling that on a countywide basis that should be able to help all of us. The pun that's not the good one here, the rising tide helps, anyway, it's going to lift all boats here, and hopefully it doesn't lift foundation of houses and everything else along with it. This being that coastal high hazard area map that Margot had presented before, and mainly for us restricted to just the coastline. But I would say that, and I think Margot had said in her presentation, Palm Coast really wasn't interested in it. If you look here, there's parts there in the C section where this does come up. This comes right up to Long's Landing, if I'm remembering right, and that area off of Cochise. And we had seen some flooding in that part of Palm Coast with Matthew. And so there are some impacts that are there. And certainly what we all realize is everything drains to that east when you're on that side, mainly of that side of 95. The thing we don't like saying out loud too much is there's parts on the west side that drain under 95 also. There are some major drains, Iroquois Canal being probably the obvious one. And so it's not a firm break point. We really don't see that break in the basin until you get somewhere right around US 1 on the railroad tracks, where you have that natural basin limitation where everything then is flowing kind of due east, everything then on the opposite sides going to the west. And so that summary for us, we do also are adding in the capital improvements element, that property rights, school facilities element we're taking away, which did get a bit of concern at our presentation before the Board of County Commissioners. With your action, with the board's action scheduled for May 16th, next Monday, would be transmittal to the DEO and the state agencies for their review. Then what they would do is if they have any objections or recommendations or comments, they issue that back to the county. And then we have time then to come back and resolve those issues. And our ultimate goal is to get the plan into compliance. And you had Margot's information that she had shared before, if you all want to jot down her information and go and contact her if you had something that was left out. But I think you did have the copies of the presentation before. With that, again, I'll close with the options that I presented previously to you, and I'll wander right back up to those. And that's for the recommendation of the transmittal or the continuance. I hope you don't do continuance. And please direct any questions or comments to me, and certainly I'll attempt to answer any of that specific policy language. We wanted to give you that opportunity over the last couple of weeks and even before then to be able to look this over, come back and say, well, why are we doing this versus something else? And so if you've got those direct comments, we need to go policy by policy, we can certainly do that. We're available for that to happen tonight, if possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Adam, it seems that you're telling us that we're under the gun.
Yeah, a bit. We're wanting to move forward with it, and so we're wanting.
I would have liked that we were all been present. We were only 4 of us here, and I know Mr. Langelo had a few questions, which he apparently wasn't able to get to you.
Did he get stuff over to you for some of the things?
No, he did not have a chance. We talked quickly today. He actually wanted to speak on the record about and I told him I couldn't do that, but he was in favor of the dog bar. Now that you voted, I can say that out loud, I guess, but probably can't. But he had shared that he had not had an opportunity to really articulate his questions and concerns on the policies. We had talked, I think, probably generally what I can say, and what he had shared last time with me, was that he was generally concerned about the years, the benchmarks being removed, and that he didn't understand exactly why that was, but it was purely the reason that the state doesn't require you to say by 2012, by 2015, you're going to do something. And
So that was one of my questions too. Doesn't that kind of hold us accountable to some things? So removing that kind of,
we used to follow that path, and I think we and others kind of quickly realized that it still wasn't happening anyway, and much of it's tied to your budget. So we've had some inquiries that have come since then saying, well, we need to hold individuals accountable for that. Well, it's still nice, but if you don't budget it, it's all your budget. Your budget drives your program, and so some of it's required, no doubt about it. There are some things that your goals, objectives, and policies that are required. There are some things that are favored, and there are some things that are just nice to haves. And I think that's probably how we all handle our own budget, our own finances. You're gonna put the money where your required stuff is, and hopefully get to the nice to haves when you can. And often what you see with this planning process is that we go through this year process every 7 years, and you see us kick things down the road 7 to 10 years every time. And so it's certainly an option for you. If you saw 2012 and here 2015 and you want to make it 2025, you can make that recommendation, and we'll try, but it's much of it's based on your budget.
Yeah, that was one of my questions too, in regards to why the deadlines were removed. And in my opinion, if you don't have deadlines, then things just get pushed and pushed and pushed, right? But I guess it didn't really matter. I mean, there was deadlines in this previously, and things didn't take place. So that was one of my questions. Yeah, I noticed too in policy A1110, there was I went through the tax IDs of that parcel, and I noticed that there was, and I might be wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, a 25-acre tax ID parcel missing out of the group. I know, well, I was just clicking through to see, and I'm not sure if it was part of the, what do you call it, the Southern Lands portion of it or not, but I guess I would just recommend that it gets double checked and made sure that if it's important, that it's looked over.
Yeah, I had a comment coming back that I had an incorrect parcel number. I went back and checked again. They were all owned by Venture 8. They were all part of the project area, and I need to emphasize that, at least here, that is not part of what you're considering tonight.
Okay.
And so that we do not have that policy language. That was not part of the regional council's recommendation, and so
Okay.
I'm pairing that with the maps. I want to have that, I put it in there with the text because I didn't want to be covert about it, and so I wanted to make sure y'all knew that it was potentially coming, but for your analysis here, that didn't sound right. Want you to be able to separate that. I think that's contentious enough, and we'll have that follow with the maps. Ordinarily, that's what those do. When they're parcel specific, if we were adopting that map fresh, it would come along with its parcel specific text amendment. And so that's I think a cleaner way for us to do that. I don't want to mix that up with what the regional council had provided for our services from them.
Okay. So then also in that policy in regards to the 7,500 daily trips and minimum 20% open space. I mean, is that something that we comment on as well, or is that out of bounds for?
Rather you reserve those comments for the June meeting. I'm not going to say you can't, but following your direction, I didn't want to, maybe I wasn't real clear on that. It was text that we were supposed to be talking about today, and that was included as part of your text. If you feel compelled to say it, go ahead. I did not include it in what you received, and I did not intend for it to be discussed tonight.
Okay, so it's purely just, go through the text, see if there's any, not really commenting on any of the actual policies or anything.
Well, no, you certainly could, but not the ones that are map related to those, and it really was just that one. We only see it at A1110 is where we see that language show up. And so that I wanted, in retrospect, I wanted to make sure that we had effectively the clean document from the Northeast Florida Regional Council to look at, because their work was. Their objective from us was perils of flood first and then statutory compliance second. And so that's what their work product is that you have before you now.
Okay. I had a note on policy A231, which was in regards to the villages, commercial villages. Trying to find it here. Flag County. So that's something, in the nature of the Old Kings Village. Is that kind of the policy that, the verbiage, the policy that would be, intertwined with the Old Kings Village off of what is it? The Polo Club?
I think this one was trying to reach more towards, and we weren't, and again, I still think it's accurate. It's the Dollar Generals. It's your neighborhood commercial. I don't want to make it convenience stores with gas dispensing. I want to make it something where, and I think you should have those. What ordinarily, it's something that decreases your trip generation outside of your neighborhood or that effectively your traffic catchment area. And so those are those things increasingly that are being taken over. Less historically you had the mom and pop stores. You just don't have those anymore. You didn't have the corner five and dime or whatever it may be. You don't have those. The prevalent use now is and the brand that everybody associates with it is the Dollar General. And what it does is it creates that ability for you to be able to run down the street and get a gallon of milk without going into town. And so I think that what that's trying to say there is to me, is having a concentration of those uses. I think probably the bigger example I'd have would be, and maybe I can't find one here in Palm Coast. I'll look down to like something in Holly Hill where you'd have the continual, although there they have the roads that are more associated with commercial. Village Center is supposed to be the idea that you have a node of those commercial type uses that are centered versus having them spread out on a more aerial component. I think that's more something like an A1A that you'd see, that we're trying to discourage then your commercial storefront, every intersection. Instead, you want to have it at a single or separated intersections where you have those activities are forced to locate there versus kind of spatially across the landscape.
I'm just going down the list of my things that I took note of.
The biggest change there being the deletion of the date. They were said by 2011.
Right.
We didn't do it, but.
So going back to the date, so on policy A253, that's in regards to the Old Kings and John Anderson, and determining improvements to those roads. So that would be a policy that I think would be important to have a date in front of, because with the developments going along Old Kings Road and John Anderson, determining the improvements of those roads are important, and probably to be done in coincide with the approval of any developments along those two roads.
You're okay with the dialogue, Mr. Chairman? We actually had four-laning announced, I think that was, John Anderson was discussing, we were talking about the Gardens project, which was a bit newsworthy to the folks in the planning department. And then similarly, when we talked about Old Kings Road, we also found out that four laning's being planned by our engineering department for Old Kings Road, so that, and the Gardens, and the Eagle Lakes. So we, apparently those studies have already been done. We could maybe even check that off and say we're all set.
Beautiful.
But I don't want to say that because we didn't know about that, but it's nice that other departments are sharing that information with us now.
Glad everyone's communicating well.
Yep.
This is just a question that well, for policy D131, there, and this is just kind of a personal, not personal, but I wasn't sure why the CO instead of building permit, it seems like it shouldn't, the order's off. I'm gonna try to find it here.
He's got that, yeah.
In regards to the county shall not issue development orders or development permits.
I should have been pulling it up all along with the overhead. I'm sorry, everybody. Yeah, so I've got it here. Let me see if I can zoom in.
Yeah, it crossed out building permit and added certificate of occupancy. I mean, you usually do a building permit before you get a certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, we may need to look at that a little in addition to, because what we get is I think what that's trying to say is that, and even CO is going to be too late with that. Remember how our concurrency program works, is that we go through it you're always drilling down, so that comp plan, you have an initial determination of comp plan amendment, initial determination of concurrency availability. That's your rough numbers. Rezoning, you're getting down more exact. By the time you get to platting, especially preliminary plat, then you're looking for those will serve letters then that are coming in. You're identifying not only the utility provider, but also any programmatic improvements to their system that make it where that subdivision can come online. By final platting, you cannot approve a final plat unless you have those improvements scheduled in some capital improvements plan, or there's capacity already available. So with this one, we may even be a little off with when we said building permit, but certainly what we're looking for when someone submits for a building permit, they're submitting to us not only utility availability, but typically that your connection fees have been paid is what we receive. Sound right? So let us look at that. That you may be onto something there.
All right, glad I got something. This is an objective D21 in regards to alleviate the potential harmful impact of septic tank uses, grounds, water supplies of Flagler County. I mean, that just goes back to, the whole deadline thing. That's something that probably should be looked at sooner than later.
I think if I could jump in, I think after Matthew, we made the decision we don't need to do the study. We've been pursuing probably since right around that, well, it's probably 2018, 2019, where the legislative priorities have included seeking monies from the state for extending public sewer.
Economic development element policy G212. I just have a note here. I think once again, just going towards, it wasn't really, just going back to date, just striking the dates out, and I just put a note that it should be done sooner than later, or actually, and where do we currently stand with it, but that's all the notes that I had from my reading through it.
So my question, Adam, do we take this to public comment before we bring it back? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So if there's anyone that'd like to come up for public comment, please do so.
Good evening, Chair and Board. Robin Paletta, Halifax Plantation. I'm on the HOA Board there. I just have a couple of questions relating to the coastal high hazard area map, and I'm wondering if, I'm going to direct it to you, but hopefully staff can respond. Excuse me, I'm recovering from COVID with 2 vaccinations and a booster. Not fun, but I'm negative. The coastal high hazard area map, does this reflect the updated FEMA maps that were issued by the federal government last fall? That's my first question. Fall of October of 2021. And will the upcoming comprehensive plan revisions and the land development code reflect the issues of the coastal high hazard area maps, particularly as it pertains along the intercoastal areas? I know Flagler, the city of Flagler Beach is taking a very deep dive into this in terms of what they're going to require of builders and developers in the area. Thank you.
Is there anybody else, public comment? So seeing none, we're going to bring it back to the board. Adam, would you like to address that?
Yeah, the FEMA maps didn't change for us, and so I know there's been some good rumors that have been out there that said, that we did have a map change that had happened, and it hasn't happened for us. That in 2018, we're still on a June 2018 effective map, and what I think has happened and what FEMA's heading towards is something they're calling, I'm going to get it wrong, Risk Map 2.0, I think is what they were rolling out. And it's a way that the insurance agencies are rating properties. And it's based on property characteristics, including year built, neighborhood risk factors. It's pretty extensive, but bottom line, it ends up being new and exciting ways for the insurance company to figure out how to increase your premiums. And in some ways, most ways that I've heard of so far, as much as tenfold is what we're seeing in Florida. It's really made it where it's unaffordable. That's even including for areas outside of the special flood hazard area. So I think ultimately that's going to need a legislative fix. I guess I'll get on my soapbox a little bit. Florida has long been a payer into the system and not a very big recipient of those funds before. And even when we have hurricane losses, we don't have a lot of flood losses that come along with it. Our damages are usually wind related, and so that traditionally FEMA's been doing good from Florida, because I think it's 73, don't quote me, but somewhere around 75% of all flood policies come from the state of Florida. And it's a little hard for us to imagine that we're having this increase in our premiums, basically then to bear the impacts elsewhere within the system. As far as the limits, this is based on LIDAR. And so this is some pretty good data that's gone into what you're showing here on the extent, and LIDAR being that kind of ground truth elevation data that comes through and shows our areas that are concerned for the coastal high hazard area. The policy language then that, and I think you probably had some foreshadowing of it in what you see here, that will lead to some very direct land development code updates that will happen, and they'll have some tough decisions for us ultimately. I think that all ties in with what we've talked about before. You may have heard us use other acronyms, CRS, Community Rating System, being something that we're participating in voluntarily as the county, to be able to give our residents in the unincorporated area the advantage of some discounts by going above and beyond FEMA's minimum requirements. And that's something I think that you're going to see some choices for the planning board, the Board of County Commissioners ultimately. And so I think the comment was well made, that we're gonna have some public, we have some needs to do some things. And so it may be increased freeboard, it may be some restrictions that are some direct restrictions on the ability to build. And so there may even be some allegations of takings and things that will come forward from this, and the regulations that are required for us really speak to that. When you look at that and what it entails, it runs downhill for the local governments to basically being instituting a policy of no build when the federal government will not do it itself. And so that will fall to us to make those considerations, and we'll have some hard choices to make potentially.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Seems that we're under the gun for this, let me bring it back to the board and see how we fare over here. You have any comments on this before we do?
No, I mean, I'm fine with making a motion now, if you guys are ready.
Do you have any questions? I don't. So do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to, I guess we're making a motion to transmit the EAR to the County Board of Commissions for review.
That you find that the amendments are appropriate, and that you recommend to the board that they transmit to the state.
Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
I make a motion that we find the, say that again, Adam?
That the amendments as proposed are appropriate, and that you recommend to the board transmittal to the state.
We recommend transmittal of the board to the state.
All right, so we have a motion. Do I see here a second motion? You second, so we have a motion and a second for the EARS evaluation and appraisals report. So all those in favor, say aye, nay, aye?
Aye.
Aye. So it's been approved. Okay, so do we go for an adjournment?
Staff comment?
Staff comments?
Board comment?
Thank you.
All right. So
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
second? Second.
Second.
Okay, meeting adjourned.